In this video, I'll be presenting an introduction to the empty core theory, which is based on object relations theory, by answering three questions. How do schizoid individuals develop an empty core? What is the empty core and how is it experienced? And how does the empty core impact schizoid lives? The empty core is related to schizoid individuals, and these are people who tend to feel isolated, disengaged, shut out, unconnected, and apathetic, have few friends, tend not to be socially involved in the community, find it hard to make meaningful commitments, especially emotionally, and often feel that life is meaningless or without any real purpose. Here we have a newborn baby or infant. The premise for this theory is that when we're born, we're more or less a blank slate in terms of our personal identity. We have no sense of self, and we need to develop a sense of being a person in our own right. And in order to do this, we're reliant on the love and care that we receive from our primary caregiver. This is because we develop a sense of being a person through getting our needs met. Let's take a look at what happens when the infant's needs are successfully met by the primary caregiver. Here we see the infant being open to the love and care from the primary caregiver, and that's showed by that spiral in the middle. And in this scenario, we see that the primary caregiver's love is in attunement with the need of the infant. Due to this, we have an infant who has developed a solid sense of self, of being a person in their own right through having their needs met successfully. But what happens if the infant's needs are not met by the primary caregiver? In the next scenario, the primary caregiver is not in attunement with the infant's needs. Now, this could be for a few reasons. It could be that the primary caregiver is unable to read what the infant needs or when they need it or the way in which the infant needs it. It could also be that the primary caregiver is projecting their own need to be loved onto the baby or using the baby as a love object rather than tailoring for the needs of the baby. Or it could also be that the infant is just very sensitive to the advances of the primary caregiver. Either way, the infant's needs are not met and the infant feels overwhelmed. Another way in which the primary caregiver may fail to meet the infant's needs is if the primary caregiver is cold, negative towards the baby, uncaring or neglectful, or non-interactive with the infant. Either of these scenarios will lead to a failed emotional connection between the infant and the primary caregiver, and as a result, when the infant's needs are not met, the infant emotionally withdraws into themselves and puts up defenses towards the outside world. And this can also result in the infant developing a negative association with loving and being loved. Once the emotional connection with the primary caregiver has failed, the infant's core remains empty. The infant's values then shift from expressing emotions in order to get their needs met in the external world to valuing internal objects, for example, thoughts and ideas. The primary emphasis shifts from emotional utility to increased cerebral activity, and this is to compensate for the deficit of emotional satisfaction that the infant is receiving from the external world. This is all part of the schizoid defense, which I will be covering in greater depth in another video. I'd like to add as well that when I'm talking about an infant, and I did mention at the beginning, the newborn was a blank slate, but this process of the development of the empty core is something that could happen over months or years. It's generally thought that by the time the infant gets to 4 years old, that the empty core, the schizoid core, will be in place. However, there are varying views on this topic and different opinions related to child development and stages at which development take place. To sum up these two different outcomes, when the infant's emotional needs are met, the infant develops an identity in his or her own right. The infant sees emotions as valuable to getting needs met in the external world and has positive emotional associations with the external world. On the other hand, when the infant's needs are not successfully met, the infant's core remains empty. The infant places higher value on their own thoughts and ideas, and the things that are most valued are inside the mind of the infant. The infant will also develop a distrust of the external world as it sees the world as a place that isn't good for getting its needs met. Now we'll move on to what is the empty core and how is it experienced. The infant has failed to bond with his or her primary caregiver and therefore has a diminished sense of self, and this has led to reduced affect, which means a restricted ability to show emotional expression, and this is the underpinning of the empty core. What is it like to have an empty core? Generally speaking, in a place where we should have a sense of self or identity or an emotional core, there is an empty void that never got filled. And so there, for me, there's a sense of something is missing. People with an empty core often describe this as a feeling of nothingness, a hollowness inside, an dark inner space, a void, a bottomless pit, or a black hole. Having an empty core doesn't mean that a schizoid person is emotionally needy. In fact, the energetic template for externalizing our emotional needs tends to be missing or greatly diminished, hence the emptiness. This is going to affect different individuals to varying degrees. Therefore, for some of us, it could be very difficult to even connect with the concept of what an emotional need actually is. Please understand that it doesn't mean that we don't have emotions. If you've watched my video on alexithymia, I explain that we tend to have a restricted range of emotions and also that it can be difficult for us to read our emotions. Also, many schizoids experience anhedonia, which reduces our ability to feel pleasure, especially socially. In relation to the empty core, the individual experiences a devaluation or distrust of the external world, and this leads the individual to value primarily internal thoughts and ideas. And the result of this is thought to create the potential, a higher creative potential in the schizoid as the individual becomes more focused on ideas. How does the empty core impact schizoid lives? I'd say that along with what I've already explained about the empty core, for many of us, it causes us to question our own existence, ask ourselves what life is really about, what's the purpose of being alive, and contemplating the deeper philosophies as to how one ought to manage this human existence. Like, what does it mean to be human and why we're here? Many schizoids can feel alienated from the rest of the human race because internally we operate in a different way, and there can also be a strong feeling of detachment from the rest of society because we have a natural detachment from the external world in general, and with the alienation there can come feelings of existential dread or having existential crises, and for some schizoids it can cause them to become particularly nihilistic. The schizoids, because of the value in thoughts and ideas, can be particularly cerebral, and it can cause schizoids to really to lean more strongly on logic than a lot of other people do, and that is mainly because of the lack of emotional connectivity available to us. As I've said in past videos, there is so much to the schizoid condition, And this has been covered by various different schools of thoughts and perspectives in psychology. Right now, I'm just laying down the groundwork so that anyone who isn't familiar with schizoid related terminology can understand these concepts and terms better. But I aim to cover a wide array of topics related to the schizoid experience as I go. But that's all for now.